blade was already resting against my throat before I saw her move. One breath, Empress Salith sat high on her throne of black glass, beneath banners that stretched 3 stories into shadow, her star-pale eyes fixed on me from across the hall. The next breath, she stood directly in front of me, one hand wrapped around a curved blade that hummed with a thin silver light, its edge pressed just beneath my jaw. I felt the cold of it settle against my skin like the first touch of frost on a window. Salith did not look like a soldier. She looked like something carved rather than born, her crown a single unbroken ring of dark metal fused to her brow, her robes falling in sharp folds that never seemed to move with her breath. Every Drask in that hall had built their entire understanding of power around the woman standing in front of me, and not one of them had ever seen her hand shake. The hall, full only seconds before with the low murmur of hundreds of Drask nobles, soldiers, and advisors, went completely silent. Tall, pale figures lined the walls on either side, their long faces unreadable, their black eyes fixed on the 2 of us standing alone in the center of the room. High above, a row of small lights blinked steadily along the ceiling, recording every second of what was happening, though I doubted anyone in that hall remembered what those lights truly meant anymore. Somewhere far below the floor, I could feel the low thrum of the ship's reactors through the soles of my boots, steady and indifferent to everything happening above it. I did not move, I did not blink. I kept my hands open and still at my sides, the way I had trained myself to do for years, and let my breathing settle into the same slow rhythm it had held since I first walked into that hall. "You will confess, Ethan Cole," Salith said, her voice low, even, carrying easily through the silence. "Your people destroyed one of my scout ships at the edge of your system. Admit it, in front of my court, or you will not leave this hall breathing." The blade pressed a fraction closer, close enough to warn, not yet close enough to cut. If she had been able to read my pulse in that moment, it would have told her something she did not expect. I should explain how I ended up here, because none of it happened the way she believed. I was not a soldier, and I never had been. The Concord had asked Earth for someone trained to walk into rooms exactly like this one and stay calm no matter what waited inside, and out of everyone aboard the Horizon, that description fit me best, for reasons that had nothing to do with courage and everything to do with years of practice. 3 days earlier, the Concord, the long-standing alliance of older species that kept an uneasy peace across this region of the galaxy, had invited humanity to its first true summit. We had only been known to the wider galaxy for 2 years. Most of the older species, the Veyron, the Mira cluster worlds, even the quiet trading houses of the Outer Rim, saw us as harmless, too young and too small to matter much either way. The Drask Dominion, however, had just lost a brutal war against the Korath Empire, losing entire systems and most of its trade routes in the process, and now needed allies more than it needed anything else. Salith needed to look strong in front of the Concord delegates who would soon decide whether her people received help to rebuild, or were left to fall on their own. So when one of her scout ships went silent near our border 2 weeks earlier, she did not wait for proof of what had happened. The ship had vanished inside a debris field that human survey teams had charted only months before, and that single coincidence was enough for a court already hungry for someone to blame. She accused humanity publicly and demanded that someone be sent to her throne hall to answer for it, alone, unarmed, fitted with a Concord scanner that would read every heartbeat for the official record, as a show of good faith. My crew waited above in orbit, aboard our ship, the Horizon, under strict orders from me not to interfere no matter what they saw on the feed. Maya, my second-in-command, had argued against the plan until the last possible second. I went anyway, because refusing would have looked exactly like guilt, and because I trusted something Salith seemed to have forgotten in her hurry to look powerful again. Every Concord summit was broadcast, live and unedited, to every member world taking part in the talks. It was an old rule, written generations ago, after an empire long since fallen had harmed an envoy from a smaller species behind closed doors, and then spent years denying it ever happened. The rule that followed was simple: no closed doors, nothing done to an envoy that the rest of the galaxy could not see for itself, in real time, with no chance to edit the truth afterward. Salith had agreed to that rule the moment she requested this summit. I do not think she remembered it, as she stood over me with a blade in her hand. "I didn't destroy your ship," I said quietly, "and somewhere underneath all that anger, you already know that." Her eyes narrowed. "Do not insult me with denial, human. I'm not denying it to save myself," I said. "I'm telling you because right now, every delegate watching this feed is already doing the math you haven't done yet." She studied me, the way someone studies an animal that refuses to act like an animal. "Your kind crossed half the galaxy in machines held together with hope, and you think that earns you the right to lecture me in my own hall." "I'm not lecturing," I said. I'm giving you a chance to put the blade down before this becomes something neither of us can undo. Salith's eyes flicked to the blade, then back to my face, as if searching for something she could not find. Why do you not fear me? I never said I didn't, I said. Fear and showing it are not the same thing. My species spent most of its history being hunted by things stronger and faster than us, and the ones who survived long enough to have children were rarely the ones who panicked first. We learned a long time ago that showing fear to something hunting you only makes the hunt easier. Careful, Salith said. I could order my fleet to answer your silence with fire. Your little ship in my orbit would not survive the hour. You could, I agreed. But every escort vessel present during a Concord summit falls under direct Concord protection the moment talks begin. Fire on the horizon, and you won't be facing humanity alone. You'll be facing every fleet sworn to that protection, arriving within days, while you're still recovering from the last war you lost. I watched the weight of that land on her, slow and heavy, the way truth often does when no one wants to hear it. I want to say I felt brave in that moment. I didn't. I felt tired, mostly. Tired of being expected to fear things that wanted me afraid. Long before I ever stepped aboard an alien ship, I had learned to hold steady through worse than this. My grandmother used to tell me about the years she lived through as a child, when sickness swept through half the world at once, and no one knew if it would ever end. How entire towns went quiet, and still came back louder than before. She survived by refusing to let fear decide anything for her, and she raised me to do the same. I grew up holding on to that lesson the way other people hold on to luck. A soft chime sounded from a panel near the throne, an ordinary, polite little sound that did not belong anywhere near a blade and a throat. Vizier Thal stepped forward, his voice tight. Your Majesty, he said. The heart reader, it is still active. Salith did not look away from me. Then let it confirm guilt. It confirms nothing of the kind, Thal said. His hand trembled slightly as he turned a small screen toward her. His heart rate has not risen since you drew the blade. It has slowed. For the first time since rising from her throne, Salith hesitated. To the Drask, a calm heart facing death meant one of two things. Either the creature standing before them no longer feared dying at all, or it had already decided the threat in front of it was not real. Both possibilities unsettled a species that had built its entire empire on fear, because both meant that fear, for once, was not working the way it always had. Behind her, a low sound moved through the gathered court, not quite words, the kind of restless murmur that spreads through a crowd the moment its certainty starts to crack. Near the front of the hall, an old general lowered his eyes. The first time I had seen any Drask break eye contact with their Empress since I had entered the room. We buried whole cities once, I said quietly, keeping my eyes on hers and not on the blade, and rebuilt them within a generation. We lived through sickness that took millions, and wars that should have ended us twice over. We didn't get this far by breaking the moment something sharp touched our throats. We got here by staying calm long enough to outlast it. I watched her eyes flick, just once, toward the long curved screen on the side wall, the one displaying the Concord feed reactions, small lights for each member world, glowing steady green when calm, shifting to amber or red the moment alarm spread through a delegation. 3 lights turned red within seconds of each other, the glow reflecting faintly across the black glass of her throne behind her, like a warning she could not look away from. Your Majesty, Thal said again, lower now, almost a whisper, though the silence carried it to every corner of the hall. The Veyron delegation has paused all aid discussions. The Mira Cluster representative has called an emergency session. The Korath observer is already transmitting this footage to their home Senate. That last name was the one Salith could not afford to hear. The Korath Empire, the very enemy she had just lost a war against, now held clean, unedited proof of her threatening an unarmed envoy during a peace summit, broadcast to every world watching. A thin holographic figure flickered to life near the doorway a moment later, a formal Korath observer projection, its voice calm and almost gentle as it spoke for the official record. Logging confirmed breach of summit protocol, it said simply, for transmission to all Concord member worlds. It vanished as quickly as it had appeared, but the silence it left behind felt louder than anything spoken before it. Every ally Salith had hoped to win that day was now watching her prove, in real time and in front of her own court, exactly the kind of ruler her enemies had always claimed she was. I heard the murmur behind her grow, soldiers shifting their weight, advisors exchanging glances they would have hidden an hour earlier, the quiet, unmistakable sound of loyalty starting to wonder if it had backed the wrong leader. I saw the realization land in her eyes before she said a single word. The blade was still at my throat, but her grip on it had gone loose, almost forgotten. Her focus pulled entirely toward that wall of small shifting lights, and toward the court at her back, that had gone far too quiet for comfort. "Turn it off," she said. "It cannot be turned off, Your Majesty," Thal said gently, not without confirming everything they already suspect. The silence that followed felt different from the one before. The first silence had been sharp, full of threat. This one was heavy, the kind that settles over a room the moment everyone understands that a single choice can no longer be unmade. Salith lowered the blade. She did it slowly, as if her arm had only just remembered how to move on its own, and stepped back from me without another word. For just a moment, before she straightened her shoulders and put her ruler's mask back into place, I saw something cross her face that no scanner needed to measure. It was the look of someone watching years of careful work collapse inside a single decision, made in anger, made in fear of looking weak, undone by the very weakness it had tried so hard to hide. "Release him," she said quietly. "Return him to his ship." 2 guards stepped aside to let me pass. I did not smile. I felt no urge to. I only looked at her once, the way you look at someone who has just learned a difficult lesson, and said the only thing that felt true. "You didn't need the blade," I said. "You only needed to ask." I do not know if she heard me, or if the words meant anything to her in that moment. But as I walked out of that hall, past hundreds of silent Drask faces, I felt her stare follow me the entire way, and I understood that the Empress who had once ruled an empire through fear had just learned, in front of the whole watching galaxy, that fear was the one thing it could no longer buy her. Maya was waiting at the airlock when I came aboard the Horizon, her relief plain on her face before either of us said a word. "You weren't afraid in there," she said quietly, studying my face as if checking for damage the scanners could not find. "I was," I said. "I just decided a long time ago not to let it choose what happens next." She nodded slowly, like that answer settled something she had been turning over since the feed cut out. By the time we cleared Drask orbit, the story had already spread across half the Concord networks, told and retold by delegates who had watched it unfold live. None of them remembered it as a story about a blade. They remembered it as the moment they learned what humanity looked like when it refused to be afraid, and the moment the Drask Dominion learned exactly how much that refusal could cost a ruler who mistook fear for strength. Some called it luck, most called it something else entirely.